Death Note, that's right, I'm reviewing anime now. I never watched any anime growing up, and this is probably the second or the third anime series I've ever watched from start to finish. And what better anime to start than Death Note, which originally ran from 2006 to 2007. Growing up, the name of Death Note was always there. I heard it when I was very young. Because it had developed a huge following across the globe, many consider this to be one of the classics. I mean, you know you're the shit when people start imitating the concept of Death Note in real life. Before I get into this review, I want you to know I have not seen much of anime. I'm still fairly new to the medium, so I don't have anything to compare this to as a point of reference. However, I do know a thing or two about storytelling and filmmaking in general, and when I say a thing or two, I mean literally a thing or two. For the people who haven't seen it and are interested in this one, this video will also be spoiler free, so don't worry about that. And finally, just take my opinion with a grain of salt. They might change down the road the more I am exposed to anime. Death Note was a manga series about a high school student, Yagami Light, who is basically the smartest motherfucker you can find. When I look up the smartest anime characters online, he is always almost on top. One day he stumbled across this Death Note by chance, and Death Note is basically a notebook that allows the owner to kill whoever he or she likes as long as they write the victim's name down while picturing their face. So Light, being the virtuous genius that he is, decides to use it for the good of mankind, so he starts killing a bunch of criminals around the world. Meanwhile, another character, L, emerges from the mix, and he's the only person Light sees as equal because they're almost equally as smart. However, L thinks what Light is doing is wrong, so this insane and exciting cat and mouse chase ensues between these two geniuses, with one always trying to outsmart and outthink the other, seeing who gets to stay ahead of the other the most. It contains 37 episodes, 20 minutes each, more than 700 minutes worth of content here, and while I do think the concept and the material is intriguing, clearly it was and probably still is highly influential, I do think it outstayed its welcome quite a bit, especially towards the latter leg of this thing. I think a good 7 to 12 episodes can be easily cut, making the show a lot more dense because it truly kind of fell off the longer it went on after a certain plot point is revealed, and it never quite picks back up like the first half ever did. The episode renewal is so blatantly obvious a filler that delays the momentum the story has going for. The later cut selection is another huge speed bump, and they are filled with them in the latter half of the series. However, I do very much enjoy the first chunk of the story. The first 20 to 25 episodes, the story is mostly pretty tightly laid out, and for the most part very entertaining. Not only the cat and mouse chase, but also the questions it imposes on the viewers. The whole theme of Death Note explores the idea of morality, whether our protagonist is doing the right thing, even for the right cause. This is a show that consistently blurs the line of what's moral and what's not, how much a person in power is willing to sacrifice to achieve in his role the perfect universe, and to what extent does that deed stop being virtuous, and also is it justified to try to stop it. Our protagonist and antagonist both have a particular scale of justice, and both on two extreme ends. That's what made Death Note so intriguing and at times thought-provoking. This is one aspect that was explored the most in the first chunk of the series. The episode Frenzy, Revival, leading up to the shocking silence were all part of some of the highlights of the entire show. And one of the reasons why it outstayed its welcome after the first half of the story is because of the fact that the question has been stretched to a certain limit. And I'm not saying the first chunk didn't have any filler, there were. They just didn't halt and bring red herring to the story as much as the ones in the second chunk. Everything that followed felt like a painful excuse, and I'm not saying there's no good cuts on the second half either. The non-verbal montage and peaceful music that kickstarted Malice I thought was a really good touch. Really felt like that was what was needed at the time. The claustrophobic bottle-like structure of 1.28 leading up to the finale, New World, were both pretty great. Throughout the series, each episode there are these act breaks where we get to see some rules binding the Death Note, and the more episodes you watch, the more you as a viewer learn about the Death Note as well. So we get introduced to more rules as we go. This is essentially a good idea, only if they did it more sparingly, I thought. There are only that many rules to tell, and I believe they're really just repeating themselves after a while, and by the end, you don't even bother reading them anymore. And I think that's probably one of the problems I have with the series, because the rules the writers created are insanely conveniently designed to further the plot, which the more they reference it, the more it feels like they're just plot devices. So it's like this backward theory where the writers want the story to go from point A to point B, but don't know really how, so they retrace back to the Death Note and create a rule that will push that transition to happen. Again, just my theory, doesn't mean it happened. Some random and closing thoughts I have other than those, I think the character Mello, who was introduced later in the show, was such a terrible and boring character. It should be illegal. His whole identity is eating chocolate. The character Misa, who I think many people straight up hated, I thought was okay, annoying sure, but I kind of get it. And also, I don't know if this is going to be a thing for most animes out there. It is a bad habit I found recently after watching this and Your Name back in May. It's what I call it the an-explaining, in which the anime characters cannot help but non-stop explain everything, what's on their mind, all the way to what just happened on screen 5 minutes ago. Let me know if it's just some of the animes, because I'm starting to notice a pattern. Maybe it's just my luck. Overall, I would recommend Death Note. I think it's not a bad show at all. It started off very well. I like the mind games Light and L pit against each other and how he explores morals and ethics. And I think for some of the moments in this entire show, it is worth watching, worth giving it a chance at least. There are also some spin-offs and sequels that I'm not really interested in it at all. And also the Netflix adaptation was completely trash when it came out, which I think there's a chance I'll be checking it out in the future probably, but not so sure. Let me know what you think of the show and how you completely disagree with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.